You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. Couple days until the season starts, and everything's coming up Milhouse for the White Sox. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, like, you could be a bad team in a dysfunctional organization and a team with a history of bad ownership and coming off of the worst season in history, and yet you can still find a way to screw up spring training when everybody should have hope, and you find a way. You find a way to screw it all up. I mean, I don't know what's worse. Is it Drew Thorpe, your big acquisition that you got for Dylan Cease, getting Tommy John surgery? So he's out for this year, and next year you're lucky if he's back like halfway through the year. So you're 2 years away from him being any kind of an impact as a rookie pitcher. Wonderful.
Yeah, that's bad.
Your biggest performer in spring, Brandon Drury, who we just talked about as the only guy besides Luis Robert Jr. you would have any faith in being able to hit 25 home runs this year. And he has the track record. And coming off of just one blip of a season, had about 4 or 5 years of enough consistency that you're like, maybe last year was the anomaly because this guy came to play. Breaks his thumb. And the team releases him. And I want to talk about why I'm not exactly sure that was the best idea. But before I even get to that, maybe, in fact, this may be the worst part about spring training for the White Sox.
This is definitely the worst part.
We said it. We said it at the beginning of spring. If Jacob Amaya is your starting shortstop, this spring has been a disaster.
And the disaster apparently has come to pass.
The Sun-Times writes an article that he's the front runner to be the shortstop to start the year. Now, I don't know if by the time you listen to this show, that's going to be official or not, or something's going to change, because it just seems like we'll talk about something like, oh, Brandon Drury's going to make the roster, and his thumb is broken the next day. So, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen here.
Well, let's talk up Jacob Amaya, shall we?
No, we can't talk him up. This is a guy.
Oh, okay.
This is a guy who in January, when the team looked at their 40-man roster and said, we need to make a space, who's the worst player on our 40-man roster? They chose Jacob Amaya and released him.
And make room for Josh Rojas.
Right, and then 3 weeks later, the Baltimore Orioles that had picked him up said, look at our 40-man. If there's the worst guy on our 40-man, who would you say it would be? And they're like, this guy we just picked up, Jacob Amaya. Let's get rid of him. So they got rid of him. And then the White Sox said, Jacob Amaya's out there. Maybe he's improved in the last 3 weeks sitting on his couch. Let's put him back on the 40-man roster. And then they did. And then he has a terrible spring, just an god-awful spring. He proves that his lifetime stats are exactly what he is, because against inferior competition in the spring, against guys who aren't even going to make a roster, he goes out and can't hit his body weight. I don't know if that's true or not. It might be.
Well, I was about to say,
what's his weight? What is his weight? Look up his weight.
He's hitting 222 on the spring. But,
okay. What does he weigh?
He weighs 180. So
he's over his body weight. Okay.
He's hitting some fast food cheeseburgers above his weight, but not by much.
All right, fine. But he's terrible. Jacob Amaya is terrible. He wasn't good enough to be on your roster at the beginning of January. Somehow he became the last guy in your 40-man at the end of January after another team said he wasn't good enough. And this is an organizational failure. Okay, we're going to put all of our eggs in the Colson Montgomery basket, even though he showed us nothing last year to believe he would be ready, except a couple of weeks at the end of his minor league season and some Arizona Fall League hot action. Everybody looks good in the Arizona Fall League. I think I can get down to the Arizona.
Look good in the Arizona Fall League.
I think I can get down to the Arizona Fall League and hit 250, maybe.
Oh yeah, yeah.
If you don't look good in the Arizona Fall League, you're done.
No.
Okay.
No. I mean, the plan A was Colson Montgomery, which is not the worst plan A in the world if you're in a rebuild, saying we're going to take our top prospect, arguably. Although I don't think he's the top prospect anymore. I think that goes to probably Noah Schultz, right?
Yeah, he's not top prospect.
yeah, we're going to take one of our top prospects and we're going to give him an opportunity to play in the majors. And then he shows up, he's hurt, he's ineffective when he's not hurt. And your plan B is evidently Jacob Amaya because Tristan Gray is also there. William Bergola is also there. Who
both of those guys did better in the spring, but I know that their lifetime stats say that they suck just as bad as Amaya. Not worse than him, not better than him. All of those players suck when you look at their actual performance when they've gotten an opportunity in the majors. They all suck pretty much equally, but at least one of them sucked less than another one. And we're still like, yeah, you know what? Jacob Amaya, he sounds like a good idea. You released him a couple months ago.
Well, and that's the part where it becomes, I understand his defensive prowess out there he is one of the better defensive players that they have on the roster. That's fine. And you know, I don't even necessarily have a problem with them bringing him back on the idea that he's a guy that can provide depth and some sort of defensive value off of the bench, or at least a body in spring training.
Why'd you get rid of him?
You can throw out there.
Why'd you release him?
Because he wasn't good enough to be on your 40-man roster in the first place.
Okay. But then he was good enough to be on it though, 3 weeks later.
But now he's good enough to not only that, but apparently be plan B.
But here's the best part about it. The argument that he's just a placeholder. I've seen that written. Well, it doesn't matter who they take at short, because whoever they take at short is just a placeholder for Colson Montgomery. So they don't need to add a guy to the 40-man roster. Like you wouldn't take a guy like Tristan Gray, for example, and add him to the 40-man and release Jacob Amaya. Like why go through all that paperwork when Colson will be here any day now and he'll just take over at short. So Amaya is just a placeholder. Colson Montgomery is not ready. And anybody sitting there saying that this is like, well, don't worry, because Amaya is just a placeholder. Montgomery will be here by May tearing it up. No, he won't. And if he's here by May, he ain't tearing it up. I haven't seen anything from him. As much as I haven't seen anything from Andrew Vaughn. Andrew Vaughn, welcome to being exactly what I said you were for the last 6 months. When I was saying $6 million in arbitration for this replacement level player who's never proven anything other than being a body on the field that any other competent baseball player could fill in. You could have grabbed any guy off the scrap heap in free agency and paid him a third of what you were paying him. And they could have stood at first base. But they just continue to march him out there. 43 at-bats. He's 10 for 43 in spring, hitting .233, .302 slugging, .629 OPS. Your starting first baseman. He's going to be on all the programs this year. They still have hope. He went up against inferior pitching of spring training. Opening day, it's the best 26 guys on every team. And the best 9 are in the field. And the best 5 pitchers are rotating on each team. It isn't what spring is. If you can't perform in spring coming off a subpar season, after a terrible start to your career, with a brand new hitting guru in there, and everybody trying as hard as they can to get you to a level they believe you can be at, that's a massive disappointment as well. I mean, I'm sorry. I know
that's a huge failure.
This show sounds like the White Sox suck show. It feels like that today. I think the Brandon Drury injury broke me. It was like the one thing that I was excited about was Brandon. Think about how lost we are at that point. If Brandon Drury is what you're hoping for.
Brandon Drury is what we're hanging our hats on.
But he was. I mean, he was making me feel good, right? Like I was like, oh great, there's a little bit of hope here. Lenin Sosa's hitting pretty well. Brandon Drury's doing pretty good. You know, and the other thing what you were talking about, I want to go back to it, and I'll let you jump in here and we'll discuss this. Chase Mydroth. Now, if the idea was Colson Montgomery's plan A, but if it doesn't work out, it's Mydroth. I can go on multiple scouting prospect lists and read what scouts have said about Mydroth. And they all say, plays shortstop, probably really a second baseman. So why is it that everybody else believes that about him? But the White Sox were like, you know what, if Montgomery doesn't work out, we'll take this guy and make him the shortstop, even though he has no major league experience. And he really projects by, according to most scouts, as a second baseman. And you've seen him play a little bit of defense. I think they're right. That's probably where he should be. So he was plan B. And then Amaya was plan C. I mean, look, there are some things that they're doing on the pitching side, developing their pitching, which is amazing. I don't know what the hell is going on the other side.
No, it's, you know, and lost in the shuffle here, Brooks Baldwin isn't being mentioned for anything, and you kind of wonder where he's at.
I would take him over Amaya. Put him at short.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
He's younger. He's got a little bit more potential. He only got his first taste last year. I know Jacob Amaya is terrible. I don't know if Brooks Baldwin is terrible yet.
No, Brooks Baldwin might actually be okay.
Right.
I don't know that Brooks Baldwin is great. I don't know that he's an all-star, but he might actually be okay. And you just don't have a whole lot of anything to hang your hat on. Like you said, Brandon Drury represented at least another viable major league hitter. He represented a guy that might be able to help protect Luis Robert Jr. because whether you want Robert Jr. to succeed because you want him traded for the best value they can get back for him, or you want him to succeed just because you want to have somebody on this team to root for gosh sakes.
They would have screwed it up. They would have batted Andrew Vaughn ahead of him, even though Drury was outperforming him. That's how this team works. This is how they operate. They're so screwed up, this entire team. They really are.
Andrew Vaughn will somehow still be batting cleanup right behind Luis Robert Jr. Well, he definitely is now because what else are you going to do? But
exactly. We got to get him out there. We got to give him as many at-bats as possible to continue to prove me right. If you're switching to a new age of life or you've got like an older parent, a grandparent, an uncle, who knows, you can go to Hyatt Home Medical Equipment to keep mom and dad, grandma and grandpa out of assisted living, make it so they can get around on their own and live independently. Hyatt has stair lifts, ramps, grab bars, lift chairs, and even bathroom remodeling. With so many guys going on the injured list for the White Sox, they may need some equipment from Hyatt Home Medical Equipment. They're going to work with your insurance. They have 0% financing for qualified individuals. Jerry would like that. They have the latest and greatest in CPAP machines. If you're unhappy with your vendor, switch now. Get supplies directly mailed to you. And they've got continuous glucose monitors. Learn all about what Hyatt Home Medical Equipment can do for you at hhme.com. Brooks Baldwin. I mean, this is a guy I would give the better opportunity to. At this point, you didn't drop Brooks Baldwin in January. Let's just use logic. Let's do like an exercise you would get with your college professor, your high school teacher. Well, let's just do a logic problem here. Let's just think logically. In January, Brooks Baldwin and Jacob Amaya were both on the 40-man roster in January. In the season before that, they clearly preferred playing Baldwin over Amaya in games. And they clearly believed that Baldwin had more potential. So in January, when the question came up, which one of these two guys are we going to get off the 40-man? They said Amaya, not Brooks Baldwin. Then they bring back Amaya. Spring happens. Amaya does not outplay Brooks Baldwin. And according to the Sun-Times, Amaya is the front runner. So either they're making up that whole story, or that's what the beat is getting. And I think the beat is getting that just as much as Scott Merkin is saying that don't count out Brandon Drury being gone. He's going to get to talk to everybody else, but there's a scenario where he comes back. So maybe a discussion has been had with his side, right? They just didn't want to add somebody to the 40-man because we got to keep all these guys on the 40-man. Look how protective they are of the 40-man. But they didn't care about getting rid of Amaya back in January, but they held on to Brooks Baldwin. That's the logic I don't get, okay? If you valued, what did Jacob Amaya do since the release in January that took the opportunity away from Baldwin, who you valued more back in January? There's nothing statistically that tells me that. Baldwin's got a higher OPS right now. I just don't get it.
No, Baldwin's got the higher OPS. His fielding percentage as a shortstop in the majors, 72 innings, he's got 1,000% fielding percentage, so he hasn't committed any errors.
No.
Which means he's at least competent out there.
Might not have super range, but he's competent.
Competent, yeah, and that's maybe the best you can ask for right now because also Colson Montgomery is kind of listed as being competent at shortstop. And Chase Mydroth, as you mentioned, he's not a shortstop by trade. He just doesn't have the arm for it. He doesn't have it. And Amaya might be the better of the two defensively, but if he's going to be a drain on the lineup, you can't go ahead and give him at bats indefinitely until Colson Montgomery is ready or until you find something better. And it just doesn't make sense to even bring him north. I mean, maybe if you're talking about putting him on the bench, but even then, you just got to sit there and go, well, but why? I mean, is he there just because Josh Rojas is going to be on the IL to start the season with that broken toe? Maybe.
And then the idea is when Rojas comes back, he's just a placeholder for him?
I mean, I would accept Jacob Amaya as a placeholder for Josh Rojas more than I would for Colson Montgomery.
Jacob Amaya is a placeholder in my line for a beer. That's about all his value is.
I wouldn't trust him with that either. I know he's got good defense and he won't lose your place in line necessarily, But I have a feeling that if he gets up to the counter, he's gonna just come up like
He's gonna whiff.
He's gonna whiff. He's just gonna come up short. I mean, it's just not gonna go anywhere.
And the funny thing is, like, we're talking about the 40-man crunch because it's a crunch. Like this, they're treating their 40. They're treating their 40-man like we just can't get rid of some of these guys. Look at the value.
Oh my God!
That they
Nobody
have.
wants them.
Right.
Nobody else in the league wants any of these guys.
Right. Meanwhile, Fangraphs projecting 3 non-roster invitees will make this team. So they believe the White Sox will get rid of 3 guys off their 40-man to make room. Travis Jankowski, and I think that's mainly because of the Talkman injury, and Nick Maton are both projected, and Mike Clevenger.
Well, actually,
as
Nick
the
Maton
closer.
hasn't had a bad spring. Nick Maton hasn't had a bad spring, and you kind of wonder if he fits into the plans somewhere. I mean, he's another guy that's, he's not good, but he's not as bad as Jacob Amaya.
And then we got Clevy in the closing role is the projection right now. We've heard that before,
which I'm okay with.
and
actually.
some of the guys that are going to be in the bullpen. It's really interesting how they're going to do this. They've got a lot of guys who could be starters that are going to be sitting there in long relief. Like Tyler Gilbert could be a starter. He's done it a little bit before, and he's going to be sitting in the pen. Bryce Wilson likely going to be in the pen because they're going to give Shane Smith, I believe, that 5th starter thing. They haven't said it officially, but that makes an awful lot of sense, even though,
they seem to be stretching him out that way.
Yeah, and that seems to be what they're doing. And then they bring in this Mike Vassell. This is another Rule 5 guy. He was selected in Rule 5. He was traded. The White Sox now have him. And I believe that he would still get returned if the Sox don't put him on the roster. Like he's just kind of getting bounced.
He still counts as a Rule 5.
Right. So you basically have 2 Rule 5 guys now on the team in Smith and Vassell. Vassell will be in the bullpen. And he's got a bunch of pitches. And he's also been out to, I think, 3 innings at a time in spring. So he can also come in for multiple innings coming out of the pen. And they're interested in him as well. So, like, what they're doing with their pitching staff feels so much different than what's going on with their players. Their pitching staff has Rule 5 guys, has hope, has youth, has guys that are working on things, has Sean Burke as their opening day starter, right? There's a bunch of new names in the bullpen. There are guys who were rewarded for having good springs. If you had a good spring, you made the roster. If you didn't do very well, you're out. Like Gus Varland looked pretty good for them last year, remember? And then they even
Gus Varland is not coming north.
And they even brought him up and put him in like a commercial or a little bit that they did on Twitter, but he didn't have a good spring, so he isn't coming with the team, right? Like the way that the pitching staff was formed was, did you perform? Yes, then you're on. Did you not perform? I did not perform very well. Then I'm sorry you're not making it. It's very different than like on the position player side, where you're still hemming and hawing over guys that you didn't care about in January coming on the roster or leaving the roster, right? Where I don't see bright spots. Find me a bright spot on the player side. On the position player side, what is a spring bright spot now that Brandon Drury is down? Is it Corey Lee playing well? Like he looks like he could be a hitter because he looks pretty good. Like the catching looks good to start the season, and you've got good catchers coming up in the future. But other than that, and maybe Lenin Sosa like showing at least some skill with the bat, although he did slow down in the back end of spring training, so I don't know. And Luis Robert Jr., same thing. Red hot, slowing down. In fact, he's on my fantasy baseball team, and they've adjusted his projected points and lowered them based on the last couple of weeks in spring. Because they're like, he ain't injured. This is just what he is. Like they're not even believing in him now. It's interesting, but some of his projections are changing in the last week or two based upon how he's doing in spring. So I have a hard time finding, like I have all this hope. Like I can't wait to see Sean Burke like start opening day. Like I believe that he may be a good pitcher. And, we had buzz about him last year. And then he had those really nice 4 games that he was there. 3 of them starts. He looked really good out there. Jonathan Cannon's got some potential. Davis Martin could have a really nice season out there he could put together. Shane Smith, I'm excited about the Rule 5 guy because he at least did something in spring training.
Well, he could K a lot of guys. That Shane Smith is going to be interesting to watch.
All this potential in. And even with Drew Thorpe going down, which I'm really upset about, the Drew Thorpe thing is crushing. I mean, this guy, I really believe that. I
was excited.
I was nervous about him during the Sox Fest time period when you started hearing them talking about like his health, and he was a little behind. Remember, like last year it was like, don't worry, he'll be ready to be 100% when he gets to spring training, and then it didn't seem like that was going to happen, and there was some iffy stuff with his health. We kept getting told, don't worry about it. And the moment I saw that, I was like, oh no, this makes me nervous, right? Then he comes out of the game. He comes out of the game with elbow trouble, and he's going to go get Tommy John. Like that. That's a big blow to this team. But even with that big blow to the team, there was enough happening with the pitching staff, and even guys that didn't even make it, that just weren't good enough. But there were some moments there where you thought, hey, this guy's coming along. The pitching is the only thing to be excited about this year. Like, I'm going to be watching games, and I'll be fine losing, 2-1, 3-2, if the pitching staff is good. Pitching coming along before the players, the positional players, and the bats, I think is going to be the theme of 2025.
It's completely the theme. There's no doubt about it that when you look at what's going on with the pitching staff, and even some of the guys that they brought in the offseason, their ability to collect talent, like, I'm actually curious to see what they do with Mike Vassell as the second Rule 5 guy, because it seems like if they see something in a pitcher, they're able to develop something as long as he remains healthy. And you're right, Drew Thorpe is a crushing blow, because that was a guy that should be a big part of the rotation now and in the future. And he was obviously the big piece that comes back for Dylan Cease, which is an important trade, in terms of how you're going to rebuild this roster. But, oh my God, I looking at Fangraphs, I hadn't really looked at it until you mentioned it. But, Miguel Vargas, we knew was going to be there, Luis Robert Jr., of course. But then really, after that, just Andrew Vaughn. They've got Travis Jankowski as a starting outfielder. Michael A. Taylor as a starting outfielder. Oh, my God,
the outfield is so disgusting.
The outfield is awful.
The outfield is gross. Like, with Benintendi being hurt, and now any hope that he was just going to come out of the gate and be what you hoped that he was going to be. Now he's coming off the injury, didn't get a spring. Ew, gross. And Talkman, he's injured, and he wasn't doing that well before the injury happened. And now you're going to throw Michael A. Taylor out there in the outfield and Travis Jankowski to stand with Luis Robert Jr. It bothers me. Like,
nobody who got any significant at bats as an outfielder in spring training did well.
Pitching looks positive, and I'm still convinced they're a worse team than they were last year. I had so much hope that we would be like, we're not going to lose 100 games. We're going to surprise people. No, we're going to lose 130 this year.
No, because they're not going to score runs. It's the problem, like you said, when you're looking at these spring training stats, there's nobody that jumps off the page at a lot of things. If you take Brandon Drury out of the equation, which you have to, even if they re-sign him, he's still hurt for a while. Nobody at first base did anything. In fact, Joey Gallo, they brought in Joey Gallo. He's going to go be a pitcher now because he's decided he sucks so bad at hitting.
Yeah, I actually like that story. I like the idea he's going to try to be a pitcher.
Well, he's got a cannon, so I'm curious. I'm curious to see how that goes, because that dude could throw.
White Sox should sign him to a minor league deal and let him learn how to pitch. 100%.
Let Bannister get a hold of him and teach him some stuff and see what happens.
24 pitchers in spring training for the White Sox had a 1.25 walks and hits per innings pitch or less. 24 of them.
That's
what do I always say? I always say, like, if you're a starter and you're at 1.30 or lower, you're a legit starter in the majors. Go look at the whip of like any starting five. Most teams cannot find five guys that can do that. Okay.
No,
and if you're in the
everybody's fifth starter is a question mark.
And if you're in the bullpen, let's say 1.15 or lower, you're a really good bullpen pitcher. And still at 1.30 or lower, there's going to be plenty of guys that can't do that in bullpens around the major leagues. You had 24 guys in spring just keeping guys off base. It's the one bright spot is the pitching. There are guys on that list that aren't even making the team. It's the one bright spot. The White Sox pitching is so good. It was so good in spring, just keeping guys off base, minimizing scoring opportunities, and being effective. And when you look at that list, let's see how many starters were in that group. Martin Perez was in that group. Okay, he had a whip of 1.19. So one of your starters had it. Shane Smith, a 0.84 walks and hits per innings pitched. Very good. Davis Martin, a 0.44. He just didn't let people on base. He was just like, no, nobody. Nobody's getting on base.
Davis Martin's just done letting people on.
None of you will reach first base. Like, that was his rule. Like, I'm not letting any of you get to first base. I mean, Sean Burke's going to be your opening day starter. His whip was terrible. He hit a 2.
Right.
But in those 4 major league games last year, I think he had a 1.00 off the top of my head. I don't have it in front of me. Okay. So, I mean, like, the guy who didn't do well in spring with that, he at the major league level last year did it for 4 games at an insane rate. So the pitching is what I'm most interested in. That's all I have. You're going to a White Sox game this year, and you're going to go to a game. You're going to say, I'm going to go buy a ticket. And if you're smart, you're going to show up the day of. You're going to walk up to the ticket window, and you're going to buy one of those cheap ones up in the corner of the upper deck. Okay? Because that's what I do. I just show up now, and I walk up to the ticket window, because why would I have to pay fees online? It's not like it's going to be sold out. Buy your ticket at the ticket window. All right? Pay cash so they can't get you with the credit card fee. Okay? Make your ticket as cheap as humanly possible. That's me. I show up with dollars at the ticket window with my kid and go, give me the cheapest seat. We have $7 seats, sir. I'll take that.
Why not?
Right. Because that's all this team is worth. And then you go in and you don't even sit in the seat because there's going to be plenty of open seats. And you're going to go find some place you want to go watch the game at, right? Now, if you have a kid, I suggest the best place to kind of start is go out to the corner and walk into the kid zone. Let the kid do that for the first couple of innings. You stand out there on that rail there, okay, over the lower deck area of the outfield, out in left field. And that's a beautiful view. Stand out there and watch it. Now, if you don't have a kid, go to that, whatever they're calling the club this year, and it's down the third base line in the corner, okay? It was like the Vizzy Club. It was the Vizzy Club. It used to be the Revolution Club. I don't know what they're going to call it this year because that club is not owned by whatever the beer company is or the brewery or whatever. They just sponsor it. So it's whoever paid the White Sox the most amount of money to name the club this year. So that club's great. Get down there after you get your $7 ticket. Go to that club. Get yourself a nice high table sitting outside on that little deck. And you're sitting at the same level as the people in the 200 level skyboxes. You're right next to a skybox. There's waitresses walking around. And you just sit there and you paid $7 to walk into that. This is how you do it, Ed. And now you sit there at that high table. You're up on that kid zone thing. And eventually you might move yourself down to someplace in the outfield because there's going to be plenty of good seats. And all you're watching is the pitching and waiting for Luis Robert Jr. to come up to see whether or not he hits a home run. That's your game day experience for the White Sox. That's it. That is what you're going for. This is the kind of season where the amenities are going to be a bigger deal than what's going on the field. A lot of times. Like you might get a good game. I enjoy baseball. I like to watch a baseball game. I was watching. Oh, yeah. Brother Rice has a new field, and I picked up my kid from water polo, and I was standing there watching an inning of whoever they were playing the other day on the brand new field that they have. They got one of those artificial, beautiful things that looks like it's out of a movie. And I just watched a baseball game. I love watching a baseball game. I love watching right before the pitch is thrown, the guy shifts 2 feet over, and he's actually right, and he makes a great play. I love baseball. At its heart, I love baseball. But you're going to have a lot of games where you're going to be like, well, I hate baseball now. Let's go to the Vizzy Club.
It's not even going to be about hating baseball. It's just you're going to have a lot of games where you're sitting there going, all right, it was nice to get outside. It was nice to maybe see some folks around the ballpark.
Right.
Nice to give the kids, the experience of coming out and seeing a game. But at the end of the day, the wins and losses aren't going to matter. And you're right, it is going to end up being about, what the ballpark experience is and what the amenities are. And that's going to be an interesting thing too, because we've had some disappointment in those aspects the past couple of years. And the idea that there's specific players to root for. It's kind of hard to root for Luis Robert Jr. to come up and hit a home run every time because you know that he's going to get traded if he's effective. And
that's fine.
Then
that's fine. Here's the thing. What would you rather want? Would you rather have Luis Robert Jr. not get traded, which means he sucked all year long, and you got nothing for him? Or would you rather him come out and have, 20 home runs by the All-Star break, and before he even makes it to the All-Star game, he gets traded, so we don't even have a representative at the All-Star game because he's wearing somebody else's uniform. I would rather have that. Because at least we got something
win the
for him.
home run derby in somebody else's uniform.
Right. But that's actually your best case scenario right now. Unfortunately.
It is. And then watch as Chris apparently gets, 3 middle infielders who can't hit.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.